Now, we both know why you're here. Switching to an S-Corp can be a great way to lock in some tax savings and keep more of what you're making legally. So in this video, I'll be breaking down what the S-Corp designation does, the process you need to follow in order for you to be able to convert to an S-Corp, as well as some of my favorite software to make this process as easy as possible. And I'll finish up by telling you some of the pitfalls you want to avoid by any means necessary. So if that's something that interests you, be sure you stay tuned. Now, I remember back when I first started my first physical products brand, I started seeing money come in and I quickly realized that the money you make is not the money you keep, right? You start realizing that all these different expenses show up. One, obviously, if you're selling a physical product, you got to pay to get the product manufactured. Next, you might be paying, for your operations, right? You have software you're using. You maybe have a website. You have maybe employees, right? Or you have contractors that you're working with. You start seeing all these different expenses that start arising, and your mind quickly shifts to how can I make sure I'm keeping as much as possible, right? How can I make sure that I'm saving as much money as possible? So that's exactly what I started doing, trying to see how I could legally keep as much of my money as possible. Now, there's a famous saying out there, I don't know who said it, but somebody did. And it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. So I was looking at all types of crazy ideas, guys. I'm talking about, I was even thinking about incorporating my business in Ireland and running my business from another location just to try to eliminate my taxes, okay? Now this, if some of you guys are familiar with what I'm talking about, this was going on back in the day. Nowadays, I think they changed the laws a little bit to make it a lot more complex, or they're in process of changing it. But a lot of the big companies were doing it, right? You were seeing like Amazon was doing it, there was Facebook was doing it, and I think Google was as well, right? You could incorporate in Ireland and then run your business from another place outside of Ireland, and then basically you wouldn't pay any taxes for any money that you made in Europe, but I believe also in America, depending on how everything was structured. I quickly realized that this was all super complicated and it required a ton of resources, and I had to probably hire a bunch of expensive lawyers just to make sure that I wasn't messing anything up. So I kept on digging, and that's when I stumbled onto the S-Corp designation. Now, this is a quick and easy way to be able to save more tax dollars, especially if it applies perfectly to you. Now, people have heard about the tax savings that come with running your own business, but unless you're being strategic, you might end up actually missing out on a lot of these savings. And that's where the S-Corp tax designation actually comes in. Now, when it comes to ease of setup, I can't find really anything that's as comparable as this. So what does the S-Corp designation do? Now, the main reason is going to be the tax implications, right? From a tax perspective, it makes sense to convert an LLC into an S-Corp when the self-employment tax that you're paying exceeds the tax burden that you would be facing if you had an S-Corp, okay? Now, this really depends on the business and where you're located, but you could see tax advantages as low as $40,000 in profit. Now, both the LLC and the S-Corp would pay applicable, federal and state taxes, but the benefit really comes down in the further tax breakdown, right? Now, when you really look at it, you'll see that the LLC tax breakdown is really, you're paying, 15.3% self-employment tax, and that's really your Medicare and your Social Security equivalent, right? Now, when you look at the S-Corp tax breakdown, you make yourself an employee, so you're paying the Medicare and Social Security tax on your employee wages. Now, the perfect example, and I'll throw up a little graphic here, which I'm looking at on my phone. You can see that the revenue is the same, right? The expenses, the only reason the expenses are different from this this graphic that I found, I think it's going to have to do with the expense of you paying for someone to set this up, right? Let's say you paid $5,000 for a tax professional to get this all set up for you. Your salary is zero on the LLC because it's flow through, right? But with the S-Corp, you're an employee and you're paying yourself $40,000. So you're going to have payroll tax, you're going to have FICA, FUTA, and at the end, that's what your net income is. So technically, you've made about the same amount of money, but you actually paid yourself $40,000, right? So that's pretty much what's been deducted, and the other taxes that you had, the employer tax side that you had to pay. Now, when you look at it, you see that at the end, when it comes to your payroll tax savings, right? You see that you've saved $3,350, okay? Now, I look at it like this. You had an expense of $5,000 that you had to pay to get this structure set up. The first year you saved $3,300 in terms of tax savings, but that's going to be continual, right? You're going to keep saving that money. So it's one of those where you have to pay in the beginning, but it's something that is going to continue to benefit you going forward. And the great thing with the S-Corp is you're pretty much only paying that tax, like the Medicare and Social Security tax, on the salary portion, right? The amount that you actually pay yourself for being an employee. That's where the benefit comes, because when you have a regular LLC or you have a sole prop, right, like a sole proprietorship, what's happening is everything's flowed through. So when you give the government or you doing your taxes, they're literally going to look, and if your business made $100,000, right, in terms of revenue, or sorry, your net income was $70,000, you're going to see that, boom, you're going to pay taxes on that $70,000. Whereas now what's going on with the S-Corp, you are able to basically it's basically like you're doing two tax returns. Not really though. They made it a little bit simpler. But the idea is now you're gonna be able to pay yourself money, and you're gonna pay a higher tax or a self-employment tax only on the amount that you're actually paying yourself as an employee. It's not self-employment tax. It's gonna be Medicare and Social Security, but you're avoiding the self-employment tax that you would have paid as an LLC on the full 70K. Okay. So now again, it can get really complex. I recommend that you talk with a tax professional. If you've done the research and you're not understanding fully what's going on, I recommend you talk with a tax professional. But here's how you actually go and set it up if you want to take a look into it yourself. Okay. Now, first, when it comes to the process of it, right? The requirements are you have to be a U.S. business. You can't have more than 100 shareholders, right? And shareholders can be individuals. They can be certain trusts and estates. They just can't be like corporations or partnerships or non-resident aliens. Okay. Now, you can only also have one class of stock as well, okay? Which for the average person, they pretty much only have one class of stock. If you are not familiar with what classes of stock you have, it's highly likely that you're only doing one. Okay, it's only if you actually went out of your way to make different classes, right? And you're getting into those types of complex strategies, then it's more than likely that you would know that you were doing it. Now, to actually make an LLC to an S Corp, you have to actually fill out a form. You got to do the form 2553, which is going to be an election by a small business corporation. Okay, now you want to make sure that you file that by March 15th of the year that you actually want it to take effect. Okay, anytime during the prior tax year also works as well. Okay, now once you've actually done that, you need to make sure that you also set up your payroll system. Now you'll use this to make sure you're paying yourself and make sure that you're properly collecting all the necessary state and federal taxes. Okay, now you don't want to mess this up, guys, but you know how the government is when they're not getting their taxes. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're making sure that you're making all those payments to them in terms of the state taxes, federal taxes, and even if you have local taxes, right? You want to make sure all that stuff is being paid. Now I have an S Corp. I don't even know all the taxes that I got to do and pay, right? What I do is I use an app called Gusto. Now, Gusto is literally the simplest company that I found, and I'm going to link to them down below. I'm actually even a partner with them now, okay? So if you want to support the channel, you can use the link down below. If you don't want to support the channel, you can, I don't know, Google search it or something. But they actually are the easiest. I'm currently using them. They literally make it to where I just had to answer a series of questions, then I had to input my information since I'm going to be paying myself, input the information of any of my employees as well, and just type in, things like where I'm living, so on and so forth, right? Because they need to know what state I'm in. That way they know who they need to be paying taxes to, what the amount of taxes are, because it varies by state, right? And then who's going to get unemployment tax, right? There's some sort of like unemployment tax you got to pay as well. All those little things, okay? And that's what makes them so great is literally I set that up with them. They pay the taxes themselves, right? So what they'll do is every month or 2 weeks, whatever you set up, they'll literally take the money out of your bank account. They'll take it out of your business bank account. They'll transfer it to, wherever you want them to send the money. So whatever your personal bank account is, they'll send the money there. But before they do, they'll take out the taxes, and then they'll actually pay those taxes to, all the tax authorities that they need to. So you don't have to worry about that, right? So they make that process extremely simple. They're also great for when you're scaling because they make it extremely easy to onboard and offboard employees, y'all. Now, this is something that people don't think about, until you get to that point, right? But something I've always thought about is it's a key feature that they have. It's called software provisioning. And the idea is that, like, when you get a new employee, think about all the software that you might be using for your business, right? You want to be able to get them up and, starting as fast as possible. So what you can do is you can link all the softwares you use to Gusto, and you can set it up to where when you add a new employee, you automatically get them set up for all those softwares. And then they all link to his, Gusto gets all those things set up for them, right? So for example, I use G Suite, so I can have it to where every time an employee gets added to my account, boom, they get a G Suite email already set up for them, so they can already, during the onboarding process, just set up like their password, their name, all that stuff. Okay, it makes it extremely streamlined. And if someone ends up quitting, boom, I just click a few buttons, and then it literally is gonna, delete their or cancel out their access for all those different softwares as well. Okay, so it works both ways. Also, I'm looking at it. I may even start adding, 401k benefits through them as well. That's another feature that they offer. Okay, so that is what is such a game changer with them. Now, guys, an important point that I need to make. Make sure that you're paying yourself a reasonable wage or compensation. Do not be the person that, you're like, oh, this is good, I'm gonna try to scheme the system, right? I made $100,000 in profit this year, but I'm gonna only pay myself $10K, right? So I can save even more on taxes. Because the IRS is looking at that. You need to make sure that you're paying a reasonable wage. They're going to look at the type of business that you say you are, and they're going to look at how much you paid yourself. And if it doesn't look right, they're going to then do an audit, right, and go deeper into it, and then they could eventually end up giving you penalties, right? So if you're a lawyer and you're paying yourself $20,000 a year, but your company made $500K, that's not going to look good in the IRS's eyes, right? So what I'll do is I'll link down below to some, reasonable compensation resources, right? There's companies out there that do studies for it, right? And, depending on how many people, how much demand's out there, I'll even make that a service that we can offer for you guys. That way we can actually do the reasonable compensation for you, right? There's a way to be able to do it to where, you literally have defendable proof. So if you do get an audit, you can say, boom, here's my documents. This shows you why I pay myself the amount that I pay myself, right? Based off of, paying my area, based off of where my time's allocated, everything, right? And, that's kind of how you want to look at it, because then the IRS can't say nothing, because they're going to look and say, okay, clearly he did the research and he knows exactly why he's paying himself X amount, okay? So that's kind of how you want to look at it. Aside from that, guys, if you are a Shopify or Amazon seller and you're looking for someone to help you with any of your accounting and bookkeeping, right, that's going to come with you starting to pay yourself, doing payroll and things like that, check out my agency. I'll link to them down below as well, and they can help you with outsourcing your accounting and making sure your books are 100% accurate, okay? So besides that, guys, let's jump into some of the pitfalls to avoid. Now, some pitfalls to avoid, guys. Talk to your accountants to see if it's something that's right for you first, okay? You don't want to make mistakes with this. I recommend, unless you're 100% sure about it, guys, and you've done the research, if you are not fully understanding whether it makes sense for you, then it makes sense for you to just touch base with an accountant just to make sure, right? On top of that, guys, you want to make sure that you know your state taxes at the business and individual level as well, because that could lead to you it may lead to reduced benefits of using an S-Corp, okay? So in that situation, it might be where, you have to, maybe you got to make a little bit more before you switch to an S-Corp or whatever the case may be, okay? Also, guys, like I mentioned before, make sure you're paying yourself enough. People make that mistake and think that they can just pay themselves whatever they want, and that leads to you that's like an easy way for you to get audited, right? When your payroll is looking way lighter than it should be, right? So you need to make sure that you're paying yourself enough. This is huge, okay? This is the biggest mistake people make. Make sure also that you're paying all the relevant payroll taxes for your S-Corp, right? That's why I recommended Gusto, okay? Link down below. But if you're not using Gusto, guys, just keep in mind that you need to be collecting the taxes from your employees' paychecks as well as paying the employer portion of your taxes, okay? And you need to know, based off of whatever the state or local agencies, you need to make sure that you know what frequency they expect you to pay at. Do they want you to pay every quarter, every month, at the end of the year, whatever the case may be? You got to do the research and make sure that you're doing that correctly as well, okay? Now, to me, the reason why I keep bringing up Gusto is they charge, I think it's like $30 or $40. It might even be less than that. I'm not 100% sure. I've been using them for quite a while. But, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. I'd rather, for me to have the peace of mind of knowing that they're the ones taking care of it, I'd rather pay that $30 or whatever the case may be to not have to worry about whether I'm doing, I'm calculating the taxes correctly, all that stuff, okay? So they make it easy breezy, so I just let them handle that, okay? That's the gist of it, guys. Check out the link below to our partner, Gusto, the link also to the reasonable compensation resources. And guys, if you're a Shopify or Amazon seller that needs any help with setting up or running their books, check out the link down below to my agency as well, okay? Guys, so that's going to be pretty much it for this video. I appreciate y'all taking the time to watch, and I'll see you at the next one. Peace.